Now we'll look at drawing layers. Drawing layers can be quite useful in presenting geometry in different ways and presenting your worksheet in different orders. Now, drawing layers generally are used to separate different types of geometry depending on how you classify them. Now remember when we talked about the title bar, we talked about the fact that the work view is split into three sheets: the working sheet, the 2D model sheet, and the background sheet, which were on three layers which don't interact with each other. This is the same thing for the layers, which we can find in the layers toolbar. Now, when we want to create a layer, we simply go to New Layers and left click. The layer will come up and we can rename that layer. So let's call this layer 1 and press enter. And we see that there's a small pencil beside that layer. That means that that layer is what's called the active layer. All drawings done and all geometry placed in the working sheet will belong to that particular layer. Let's add two more layers, layer 2 and layer 3. We see with each new layer that the pencil or the active layer essentially goes to the new layer. So the newest layer will always be made active. If we want to switch from a layer being active to another layer, we simply go to Make Active by right-clicking on the layer that we want. So we right-click on layer 2 and we make active. We right-click on layer 1 and we go to Make Active. If we want to hide any of the layers, we right-click on the layer and we go to Hide. If we would like to show a layer, we would go to right-click and Show. Now you can go between showing the layer or showing only that particular layer. When you choose to show only one layer, that layer will automatically become active. Only active layers will remain visible. You cannot hide an active layer. So to unhide or to show each other layer, we'll have to go to Show. Keep the default layers show as well. So generally, when you start the program, you'll see that you're presented with the default layer as the only layer available. Now, let's actually use layers and see how useful they can actually be. So let's close this and let's open an existing document on our desktop, and it should be here in draft example 1, open. So here we have a drawing, and this drawing has three layers: the final, dimensions, and construction layer. This is essentially one way of putting together layers in a useful format in any drawing, where we can have the final, as in the drawing itself, the final drawing, the dimensions, which could be a layer which holds the dimensions, all dimensions on the drawing, and the construction. Because there are times, as you'll see in your first tutorial, that you may need to use construction geometry to make reference points and reference lines so as to create the rest of your geometry. Now in reality, we don't really want to see construction or construction lines in our final drawing. And depending on how many dimensions we use and where we place them, a drawing can become cluttered if there are too many dimensions. So we want the option to actually be able to view the drawing without dimensions cluttering our view. So let's look at each of these layers and see what we can do in terms of cleaning up our view here. So as I was saying, you don't really want to see construction geometry. So let's right-click on the construction layer, and select Hide. We see now that the construction geometry that was there is now hidden. Let's also hide the dimensions so that we see the final drawing by itself. So here we see the final drawing, and we have dimensions and constructions hidden. Let's show only the dimensions. Now this isn't very useful because we don't have anything to reference here, but this can help in terms of cleaning up your dimensions if you want to position them in different ways. Let's look at just construction. We see that two lines were used to make the final drawing, this cross, and essentially keeping the construction tab around, the construction layer around, is really up to you. You can plan ahead and not need to keep your construction, or if you plan to expand on your existing drawing, keeping construction around in a separate layer can be quite useful. So let's show each of these. And let's make our construction layer active, which it is right now. Let's actually make more geometry here. So let's take a line, just connect it here. And let's also connect the line from here to here. So all that we're doing right now, all this drawing that we're doing, these additions are being placed in the construction layer and no other layer. If we're to hide the construction layer, we have to make another layer active first. If we hide the construction layer, we see that all those drawings we made will not be shown in any of the other layers because it's only done in the construction layer. Okay, so we're in the final layer. Let's actually add a bit more geometry. Let's put one circle here, and let's do the same thing here. And let's just use trim and get rid of those. There we go. And let's get rid of these two. Now we deleted the dimension that was there, but we know that that dimension would have been deleted because there's nothing to reference. Now while we deleted that, as long as the dimension needed to reference some material, it will be deleted automatically from the Dimensions tab as well. Now let's see what happens when we go to the Construction tab. And let's go to Show Only. We see that these are constructions. Let's show our dimensions. The dimension that was deleted has now been removed. And if we show only Final, we see that this is our final feature, a final drawing, So all of the geometry depends on which layer you're making any changes to. So when we want to show everything, we just make sure that all of the layers are shown, and we need to pay close attention to which layer is actually active. Now planning ahead in terms of how I did here, making a final, a dimension, and a construction layer is very useful, and we'll see it as we go along, and we'll see how it can help us in terms of our productivity, but it's not always a requirement. Sometimes you may not need 3 layers, sometimes you might need more. Sometimes you might not need more than one. So it's really up to you, and it's really up to your style. The thing with CAD in general to remember is that there's not necessarily any right or wrong way to do anything. The thing with CAD is really to try to increase your productivity in doing that thing. So you try to find the fastest way in which you're comfortable with to accomplish the use of the tools that you are familiar with. Okay, and that's it for this.